When is Christmas? Let's talk about the when. When's Christmas? December 25th, December 25th, all right? In all likelihood, that's probably not true, okay? So if you've ever been taught Jesus was born on December 25th, probably didn't happen, okay? The way that we got that day, there's a few different theories, but the one that I kind of like the best is that the early Christians believed that Jesus died, Jesus was crucified on the same day that Mary conceived. So they believe that Jesus died on March 25th, and that they also believe Mary then was conceived Jesus on March 25th. And so add 9 months to March 25th, and you get December 25th. That's how we get Christmas as December 25th. Probably didn't happen, all right? Probably wasn't even close to December, but really we have no idea. We have no idea when Jesus was born, but we celebrate it December 25th, okay? So that's misconception number one, the when. Misconception number two, the where. Where was Jesus born? In a manger, in Bethlehem. Where was the manger located? In a barn, right? In a stable. So I brought my family's nativity from home. All right, I borrowed this from my children. This is our nativity. This is one that we have most predominantly displayed around the house. And by displayed, I mean pieces scattered everywhere. I was able to get all the pieces together. We've got our nice little stable, the Mary and Joseph, the Jesus. The reason I think this is how it is taught is a little bit of the language from Luke's gospel, where Luke says Jesus was born in a manger because there was no room for them in the inn. Y'all heard that before? So that word inn is very misleading. Very misleading. The Greek, the way that word really probably should be translated is place to stay. Place to stay. So think about this. You're traveling out of town. You're going somewhere else. Where do you stay? In a hotel, right? Makes sense. You need a place to stay. They've got hotels. They've got inns. Well, what if you go there and there's no room in the inn? Well, that's what many people believe is the predicament that Mary and Joseph found themselves in. However, if you are traveling somewhere where you have family, where potentially, not necessarily, but potentially, where are you going to stay? At their house, right? With your family. So when Mary and Joseph traveled to Bethlehem, they were traveling to the place where Joseph was from, where his family lived, and in all likelihood, the place they stayed, the inn as we translate it, the place they stayed was in the house of family members. And houses back then were probably one, maybe 2 room houses, right? Don't think your house. We're talking 1 room, where the entire family and even some of the animals sleep at night. Everybody's there. You're sleeping in the same room as mom, as dad, as brother, as sister, as cousin, as nephew, as Fluffy and Furball, and all the animals are all there under one roof. And so when Mary and Joseph were in Bethlehem, and the time came for her to give birth, there wasn't room in the place where they were staying in the house with their family members because there were so many people there. And so they found the one place that they could put Jesus, and that happened to be in a manger. So this, I don't feel like this is very accurate. And so I want to change this. Is that okay? Can I change our nativity? We'll leave all the people for now, but I'm going to get rid of the stable. All right. We'll keep the angel. And I brought a house. Okay. I think this is more biblically accurate. Do you agree? Is this okay? Maybe not pink, okay? This is all I had to work with at home, but I think this is a little more accurate to the biblical story. So, misconception number 1, the when. Misconception number 2, the where. Misconception number 3, the who. Who was at the birth of Jesus? So talk to me. Who's there? Mary, Joseph, all right, his parents. That's good. We're off to a good start. Wise men. Who else was there? Shepherds. Angel, right? And we've got, my nativity, for some reason, we've got a sheep, but we don't have any shepherds. So we'll let the sheep represent the shepherds. We've got our Mary or Joseph. We've got our Jesus. We've got our angel. I don't know if the angel we'll leave it. And we've got our wise men, okay? So you know, pretty complete nativity, okay? Misconception number 3, the wise men weren't anywhere near the birth of Jesus. They were nowhere near the birth of Jesus. And for some reason, though, this is the scene that we have where the wise men come, and here are my 3 wise men, right? They come and they're worshiping Jesus. But the story of the wise men, which is actually the story we're going to look at today, the story of the wise men is that they came much later on. It was much later when Jesus was older, maybe even 2 years old, because they did not start their journey until the star appeared. The star appeared at the birth of Jesus, and then it took them time. All right, we see the star, we've got to interpret the star, we've got to pack, we've got to plan, we've got to travel. So I don't think this is a very accurate representation of the nativity. So I'm going to change it one more time. Is that okay? All right, so I'm going to take my wise men. I'm going to take them over here. Because they're nowhere near the birth of Jesus. Nowhere near. So this is our setting, all right? So Christmas Day. Oh, I just knocked the clicker off, so bear with me. Hopefully, Christmas Day, this is what we are looking at. This is the scene, as best as I could put it together, okay? And so we're going to look at the wise men today, all right? We're going to look at the wise men. I think the wise men present us with an extraordinary perspective when it comes to the birth of Jesus. They're an extraordinary story. It's one of my favorite stories. They're extraordinary people. And I really believe that the wise men present us with an extraordinary opportunity about what it means to worship Jesus as king. And that's what we want to focus on today, is what does it mean to worship the king? And we're going to take a look at the story of the wise men in order to see that. So after Jesus was born, again, not the day he was born, this is happening significantly after Jesus was born. We don't know when this happens. All we know is after. In the days of King Herod. Now, who's King Herod? That will help us pinpoint a little bit about when these events are taking place. Now, Herod wasn't really a king, okay? He's called king. He likes to think of himself as a king. He's not really a king. These events are taking place during the time of the Roman occupation. Rome is currently big brother, all right? They're the ones who are in charge, and what they do is they conquer everybody, is they let them have a sense of self-rule still, of their own identity. And so you've got to be politically subordinate to Rome. You've got to be economically subordinate to Rome. You've got to be militarily subordinate to Rome. But they still want to give the people a little bit of autonomy, and so they appoint kings to govern the people. But these are really puppet kings. Rome's the one pulling all the strings. Herod's that puppet. Herod's the puppet operating and living in Rome as these days. Now Herod, again, he's king. He's really functioning more as a governor. Herod's rule as king was from about 37 BC to 4 BC. So you're getting your history lesson for today, okay? 37 BC, he died around 4 BC, which means if these events, the events of the wise men coming, took place during the days of King Herod, it meant Jesus had to be born before 4 BC. So, sorry to burst your bubble again. Jesus wasn't born in the year 0. Okay? Didn't happen. The whole BC AD system didn't happen really till about the 5th century. Jesus most likely was born probably around 7 or 6 BC during the reign of King Herod. Now, Herod did a lot of really good things. Was a great builder of public works, helped build up the cities. He kind of rebuilt and renovated the temple. But he was a terrible, terrible person. He was so paranoid that he would lose power. He was so paranoid that people would try to overthrow him or get him out, that especially towards the end of his days, his paranoia led him to really butcher and kill sons, daughters, wives, family members, anybody who he thought would be a risk to his rule and reign. He got rid of them. And it was so bad that even Caesar Augustus said he would rather be Herod's pig than his son, because there's a greater chance that you would survive if you were Herod's pig. That's who was in charge in the days when Jesus was born. So Herod died in 4 BC, which meant Jesus had to have been born before then. And there are a few things that to me suggest when this happened, the wise men coming when Jesus was older. So I'm going to skip to the end of our passage today, Matthew chapter 2, verse 11. The wise men, after they come to Jesus in Bethlehem, they enter the house, all right? house. They enter the house and they saw the child, all right? They saw the child, not the baby. They saw the child with Mary, his mother. So this is a few years after Jesus is born in the days of King Herod where the wise men are making this journey, all right? So who are the wise men? Who are the wise men? That's the question that I think we need to talk about. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea in the days of King Herod, wise men from the east arrived in Jerusalem. So the Greek word that we get wise men from is the word magi, which sometimes I feel like we might use interchangeably even in our English language, the magi, the wise men. These wise men weren't really these like old people with long beards, full of wisdom, full of knowledge. These aren't your Harvard professors. These aren't most likely these wise men were astrologers. And they're probably in a wealthy class. They might have been priests where they're from. They might have been the top echelon of society, but they're not kings as we often depict them. So our wise men over there, right? Way off. They've all got kind of crowns, and that's really not who we're talking about. We're talking about a bunch of rich dudes in an astrology club, sitting around looking at the stars at night. Most likely from the east, most likely they're from Persia. We don't know, there's a lot of speculation, but most likely these people were from Persia. Tradition tells us there were 3 of them. Why are there 3 wise men? There were 3 gifts. 3 gifts: gold, frankincense, myrrh, 1 gift for each person. But really, we have no idea. We really don't know how many there are. There might have been 3. There might have been 4. Regardless, none of that's really relevant. Regardless of how many there were, how many top astrology club dudes there are, as they're traveling from Persia to Judea, this would have been a large group of people. Large group of people. The wise men would have come. Their families might have come. Their servants might have come. And some scholars even suggest that they had even a small army accompanying them, almost as like a security force, because they're transporting these very valuable gifts. So there might have been upwards of 300 people traveling with the wise men kind of in their company, coming to Judea, coming to Jerusalem, looking for the birth of this king. And so wise men from the east arrived. They arrived in Jerusalem. So we don't know where exactly it is we're going, so let's go to the capital. Let's go to the big city. Let's go to the main city. Let's see if somebody there can give us directions. They come to Jerusalem and they begin asking, where is he who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star at its rising and have come to worship him. So they saw the star. Right, these astrology dudes, they're out at night. All of a sudden, this big bright star appears in the sky, and they don't really know how to explain it. And in the ancient astrology world, which I'm not an expert on, but apparently in the ancient astrology world, the appearance of a new star was often believed to herald the birth of a new person of significance. So we're out every night, we're looking at the stars, a new one appears, somebody important has just been born. And so these wise men, in their study of the stars, somebody important out in the world has just been born. Let's go figure out who it is. And so they pack up, they plan, they get these gifts together because we want to make a good impression to the person who's just been born. And they set out in the direction of the star appeared, and their travels lead them to Jerusalem. Now, when somebody important is born in the place where you are from, you kind of know about it, right? And it's a little different in our day-to-day because social media and internet and all that kind of stuff, right? Information gets out. But think about the royal family. Anybody follow the royal family in Great Britain very much? No? Anybody seen The Crown? All right, that's the best. Yeah, okay, so we got a few Crown watchers. So the royal family, all right? There's the whole Kate and William royal wedding, right, years and years ago, which was a big fuss. And then a few years after that, George was born. George, who would one day be the future king, right? William, who's now next in line, and his firstborn, George, right? When George was born, internet blew up. And you got people everywhere announcing, congratulations to Kate and Will, and we're so excited for George. Lots of hoopla over the birth of this future king. The wise men are expecting that when they get to Jerusalem. We're here, all right? We heard a king has been born. Where's he at? We want to pay our respects to the newborn king. We want to come. We want to tell him how excited we are that he is here. Where's he at? And Jerusalem, for the most part, is silent. It's been 2 years maybe since this king was born, and it's silent. And so they go to the person who they think is going to best be able to give them the information, and that's King Herod. King Herod, who's not the person you necessarily want to go to. So the wise men, how do they interpret this king as being from Judea? So Numbers 24. Numbers 24, this is Balaam. Y'all heard of the talking donkey story in the Old Testament? So that's Balaam, that's who this is. Balaam, that man makes this prophecy in Numbers 24. I see him, but not now. I see him, but not now. I perceive him, but not near. A star will come from Jacob, and a scepter will arise from Israel. Now, most likely, these Persian wise men were familiar with this prophecy from the 70 years that the Israelites had spent in exile in Persia, and they'd brought their scriptures with them, they brought their traditions with them, they brought their teachings with them. The Persians would have been exposed to them, and they're familiar with prophecies like this, so that when they see this star appear in the direction of Judea, a king has been born. A star appears from Jacob. And what do kings hold? Scepters, right? Maybe not all kings, but right, little scepter, little stick with lots of jewels on it. We're here to find this king. We're here to find this king. Let's go see who can help us out. So, when King Herod heard this, when he heard the wise men were here looking for a new king, he was deeply disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. Why would King Herod be disturbed? A new king would be a threat to him. Herod is not part of the kingly line. Herod is not descended from David. Herod is essentially a usurper to the throne who's been put there by Rome. And he knows that if a descendant of David were to come along, that person would have more of a claim to the throne than him. And Herod, if there's one thing he loves, it's power. It's the throne. He wants to keep that more than anything else. And so he's very disturbed that there's news of a potential new king being born in Judea. And all Jerusalem with him. All Jerusalem's disturbed as well. If Herod's upset, we don't want him going on another tantrum. We don't want him going off, which is eventually what he'll end up doing. He's so enthralled by this news and trying to find this would-be king that it's going to lead him to massacring boys in the area of Bethlehem, hoping to kill the boy, right? We're not going to look at that story today, but they're rightly disturbed. They're rightly worried that Herod is going to do something not so good. And so any talk of new king would have been troubling to Herod, and the people are worried. So what's Herod going to do? So Herod is going to assemble all the chief priests. I need to get my wise men together. I need to get the people together who are going to help me figure out where I can find this king. He assembles the chief priests, the scribes of the people, asks them where the Messiah would be born. Now that right there shows Herod knows absolutely nothing about the scriptures. Because if he knew the scriptures even just a little bit, the people are anxiously waiting this Messiah. They've been waiting thousands of years for the Messiah, for the promised one who would come, that God has said would solve all their problems. They're waiting, so they know the prophecies. Any good Jew knows the prophecies. Herod does not. Herod is not a very good Jew. So he assembles his A-team, and they respond. In Bethlehem of Judea, they tell him, because this is what was written by the prophet. And so Micah, if you looked at Micah chapter 2, Micah chapter 5, sorry. And you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, because out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel. So Micah prophesies and says, the Messiah, the one who's going to come and save God's people, will be born in Bethlehem. And the scribes, the chief priests, know this. They tell this information to Herod. Herod has an alternative agenda. Herod is going to look for this king so he can put him down, so he can squash any threat to the throne, any threat to his power. So he feels threatened. He's learned where the Messiah is going to be born, but now he needs to learn the when. when was this child born? I can't just go to Bethlehem. Well, he probably could. I can't just go to Bethlehem and kill everybody, right? That's not a very good PR move. But if I can figure out when this child was born, I could go in and probably find him, find the child about the right age. So let me figure out when the child was born. He summoned the wise men, asked them the exact time the star appeared. And the wise men, not knowing the whole situation, not really knowing Herod, most likely told Herod when the star appeared. So now Herod's got the where, Herod's got the when, but he still wants the wise men to do some of his dirty work with him, for him. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, go, search carefully for the child. When you find him, report back to me so that I too can go and worship him. Go find him, come tell me who he is, come tell me where he is, so that way I can go and I can pay my respects to this new king. That's not what Herod wants to do. Not at all what Herod wants to do. Herod does not want to worship him. Herod wants to kill him. And thankfully, again, fast forwarding a few verses, the wise men will not go back and report to Herod, being warned in a dream. This is after they visited Jesus. Not to go back to Herod, they returned to their own country by another route, kind of leave Herod hanging. All right, Herod knows the where and the when, but he's still not sure who this child is. So the wise men, they're going to make their way. They're going to make their way after they see Herod. They went on their way, and there it was. The star they had seen at its rising. And now it's actually going to move and lead them. It led them until it came and stopped above the place, right, above our house, above the place where the child was. And when they saw the star, they were overwhelmed with joy. So they go on their way for the first time, right? So far, it's just been a stationary star in the sky, leading them to this area, leading them to Judea. And now it's actually going to move, and it's going to lead them. It's about a 5-mile journey from Jerusalem to Bethlehem. It's going to lead them from Jerusalem to Bethlehem, and the star is going to miraculously stop above the house in which Jesus is in. And they get there, and it's been a long journey. All right, again, potentially years of planning, of traveling, of searching. They finally get there, and how do they respond? With joy, right? You can relate to that. Anytime you go on a long road trip, even if it's just a couple of hours, when you get to where you're finally going, there's that little, yes, I can get out of the car, I can stretch my legs, I can relax, I don't have to get back in the car for a few more days. They are overwhelmed with joy. Our journey is over. We've found the place. We've found the person that we are looking for. They've finally gotten to meet this king. And so they enter the house. They saw the child, again, 2-year-old child, with Mary, his mother, and falling to their knees, they worshiped him. So, worship. This king, this person, they've heard the prophecies, this king who will come, who will save their people, and they deem that this person is worthy of worship. And in response, as an act of worship, they bring gifts. They opened their treasures, and they present him with gifts, with gold, with frankincense, and with myrrh. So I've got some gold, some frankincense, and some myrrh. They're hiding in my house. So, gold. The wise men come, they present Jesus with gold. Why gold? It's a gift fit for a king. Gold symbolizes royalty. Gold symbolizes wealth. Gold is a worthy gift to give to a king. It's a precious metal, it's beautiful, it's got lots of value. Solomon, when 1 Kings talks about Solomon's wealth, in the span of about 10 verses, or 7 verses, gold is mentioned 10 times to illustrate how wealthy Solomon was. And so the wise men, they bring gold and they give it to Jesus. But they also bring what? Frankincense. Frankincense. So both frankincense and myrrh, I'll go ahead and get both of them out. Frankincense and myrrh are both gum resins. Does anybody know what a gum resin is? That word probably means absolutely nothing to you. It didn't really mean anything to me. So think like almost like a rock. This is real frankincense, real myrrh. It's kind of rockish, but it's got a little bit of squish to it. Gum resin. So I'll leave, if you want to come look at gold, frankincense, and myrrh after the service, I'll leave them up here. Feel free to come up to the stage. Y'all can take a look at them. The wise men bring gold, frankincense, and myrrh. So both frankincense and myrrh are gum resins, and they're derived from trees and bushes, and they're imported from the east. So they're not natural to Judea. But it makes sense for the wise men coming from the east to be able to bring frankincense and myrrh. Frankincense, this one right here, frankincense has often been used to symbolize Jesus' deity and his priesthood. It's a expensive gift, and it often is attributed with gods and with priests, of which Jesus is both. And so this gift in particular, right, gold, fit for a king, royalty, but frankincense sets him apart from other kings. So every king has gold. Not every king is going to have frankincense. This frankincense is going to illustrate Jesus' deity and his priesthood. Frankincense is also often used, especially in the temple setting in Judea, it was used in the offering of sacrifices. And it's given to Jesus, who will one day be a sacrifice. Myrrh, also like frankincense, it's a fragrant spice used to make perfumes, used to make oils. Myrrh had some healing properties to it. So there are a few different reasons why this would have been an appropriate gift. So myrrh, the oils and perfumes made from myrrh would have been used to help treat a child's cord from healing. It would have helped Mary with some postpartum healing. Again, if they'd gotten it there on time, but maybe Mary can use it again in the future. It's also, though, it was used in the embalming of bodies as an oil, as a perfume. They used it when people died to help prepare the body for burial. And so these gifts are full of symbolic meaning, all meant for royalty, all meant for a king, but also meant for a person who has died and somebody who will be sacrificed. And this meaning ultimately helps us point to Jesus, not only for who the baby he was born as, but for the king that he would die. Where Jesus, again, he's born, he's a king, he's part of this royal line, part of this priestly line, but Jesus wasn't meant to sit on a throne on earth and rule over Judea, to rule over Israel. Jesus presented myrrh and frankincense and myrrh at his birth, would more than likely also be presented with these things at his death. As he would go and be killed, he'd be crucified, he would be buried. And so these gifts that he's given as a child at birth, he would also one day receive at death. And we see that. So look at John 19. This is after Jesus has died. Joseph of Arimathea, who was a disciple of Jesus, but secretly, because of his fear of the Jews, asked Pilate that he might remove Jesus' body. Pilate gave him permission, so he came and took his body away. Nicodemus, who'd previously come to him at night, also came, bringing a mixture of about 75 pounds of myrrh and aloes. They took Jesus' body, wrapped it in linen cloths with the fragrant spices, according to the burial custom. So as we talk about Jesus' birth, which we love to talk about Jesus' birth around Christmas. Love to talk about his birth. But as much as we talk about his birth, we can't talk about his birth without talking about his death. Christmas points us to the cross. There's no way of celebrating Christmas without also thinking about and celebrating the cross. And Jesus' birth would mean absolutely nothing if it were not also for his death. Jesus was born so that he might die and so that we might live. And that right there should lead us to worship just like the wise men. So worship, I want to share with you my definition of worship. There are lots of definitions of worship. Worship is valuing something supremely. Valuing something supremely. So what you worship is the person, it's the thing, it's the idea that motivates your decisions and it directs your actions. It informs your thoughts and it controls your perspective. Worship is where all your attention goes. And so what I want to do before we kind of wrap up is I want to compare and contrast two different kinds of worship from this story. Because we see lots of different worship in the story. So first, let's take a look at Herod's worship. Because Herod claims that he wants to worship Jesus, does he not? in the story? Tell me where he is so that I might go and worship him. So Herod has a very poor view of what worship is. Very poor view of what worship is. Herod, when he said that he wanted to go and worship Jesus, he had an agenda. He had an agenda. He had something that he wanted to accomplish. The wise men weren't aware of that, but he had something that he wanted to accomplish. He wanted to kill Jesus. That's the box. That's the check mark that he wants to check off. He wanted to accomplish something. He wanted to meet what he perceived to be an item on his to-do list. And what he wanted to do, what he needed to happen, was he needed to stay in power. So here's everything I have to do in order to stay in power. Kill Jesus. Item number one. That's what worshiping meant for Herod. Because what Herod valued supremely above everything else was him staying in power. So in order for me to worship, I got to kill Jesus. I got to kill Jesus. So he had this agenda. We can't do this. We cannot have an agenda when we worship. We cannot go into worship hoping to get something out of it. And I feel like we do this all the time. We come to worship and we think about, what can I get out of this worship service? How can I be served? How can the singing, how can the musicians, how can the band serve what I want today? Give me what I want. How can the pastor, how can the teaching, how can the sermon fill my needs and check my boxes? That's not how we should enter into worship. We don't enter into worship because we have an agenda, because we need boxes to be checked. We enter into worship because Jesus is worthy of our worship. He has earned the right to be worshiped. He has earned the right to be what we value supremely, not our needs. So Herod has an agenda, not good. Secondly, when Herod said he wanted to go and worship Jesus, he was acting out of self-centeredness. Self-centeredness. His focus was not on Jesus. His focus was on himself. It was about his needs. It was about what he needed. And we can't enter into worship like this either. We can't think about ourselves, what we want. It's not about what songs we want to be sung. It's not about how we want to feel blessed. Worship is all about Jesus. And I hear this all the time, where I'll leave a church service, I'll leave a time of worship, and people will say, myself included, I've said this before, I just didn't really like the songs today. It wasn't good. I didn't really get anything out of the preaching today. It didn't connect with me. The jokes weren't funny. The props were weird, right? This is how we respond. We leave here, and here are all the ways that I was let down today by the worship service. And this is the wrong approach to worship. Because when we take this self-centered approach, when all we're thinking about is ourselves, we are worshiping ourselves, we're serving ourselves instead of serving and worshiping Jesus. The pastors and the musicians are there for my needs, for my wants. It's not about Jesus. Worship becomes all about me. Don't worship like Herod. Don't worship like Herod. Worship like the wise men. The wise men remind us about the importance of worship and about why we need to come and we need to worship Jesus. Think about who the wise men were for a second. Pagan, Gentile, not Jews, pagan philosophers, astrologers, Persians, whatever you want to say, yet they understand who this baby is, who this child is, who he will become, and that he is worthy of worship. He is worthy as being valued supremely. They didn't come to Jesus to get something, they came to give. They gave extravagant gifts, and they gave their respect, they gave their adoration, they bowed down, they humbled themselves, and they declared that Jesus is king. And that he is worthy of everything we have. Not, Jesus, what can I get? Jesus, what can you give me? Jesus, how can you serve me? Jesus, give me. Jesus, fill my needs. Jesus, check my boxes. No, Jesus, you are worthy. You are worthy. You are worthy of it all. Not because of me, right? It's not about me. It's all about Jesus. And some of us have been in church our entire lives. We've grown up in church. Even if we haven't grown up in church, we're familiar with the Christmas story. We know the Bible stories front and back. We're familiar with the Nativity, even if we had some misconceptions about it. Maybe you were in a Christmas pageant as a kid. Maybe you played a wise man. I don't know. But we know these stories. We know these stories. Yet I still feel like we're missing how and why to worship Jesus. We just go through the motions. We check the boxes. We fill our needs. And we fail to recognize and worship Jesus for who he is and for what he has done. And the birth of Jesus is wonderful. It's great. We want to celebrate it. We want to talk about it. We want to put up decorations, have Christmas parties. It's all great. But we should remember and worship Jesus for the selfless act of entering into our world. Selfless act of entering into our world. But we can't stop there. We can't stop at his birth. Because again, if all we do is celebrate his birth, we're not truly worshiping Jesus. We worship him because of his birth, but we also worship him because of the life that he lived, the sinless, perfect life, a life that none of us are capable of living. We worship him because of his death, a death that we deserved because of our sin, but yet Jesus said, I will die that death for you so that you don't have to. And then ultimately we worship Jesus because of his resurrection. Because he was able to overcome death. He was able to conquer the grave, which we can't possibly do. We're not capable of doing that, but Jesus can, and he did. And he, because he did all of those things, because he was born, because he lived a perfect life, because he died a sinner's death, because he conquered the grave, he is worthy of worship. He is. And so what does your worship look like? When you come to Jesus, when you come to church, how do you worship? Who or what do you worship? Right? Are you here worshiping Jesus? Or are you worshiping yourself? Or worshiping something else? What do you value supremely? Because I think a lot of us really do need to ask that question. And for a lot of us, we probably are not worshiping Jesus the way that we need to worship Jesus. We're focusing more on ourselves. We're focusing more on our life. We're focusing more on our family. And we're not actually worshiping Jesus. And so worship Jesus today. Worship Jesus every day. Worship Jesus like the wise men. Worship Jesus the King. Let's pray. God, we love you. We thank you. We thank you for sending Jesus. Thank you for sending him to come into this world and to do really what we couldn't do, God. We could not live a perfect life. We disobey you time and time again. We fall short of your expectations for us. We don't worship you, and you don't hold that against us. You don't reject us outright. Instead, you made a way for us to have a restored relationship with you by you coming, by you entering into this world, taking on human flesh, becoming a boy, living this life, and dying. And we don't have to do that anymore, Jesus. And as we think about that, as we think about what you gave up, what you left behind to become God incarnate, and as we think about what you did that we were not possible of doing, how can we respond in any way except to give you worship, except to give you praise, except to lift up our hands and say, Jesus, you are King. You're King of my life. You above are worthy of everything. You're worthy of all of it. You're worthy of all my praise. You're worthy of all my worship. You're worthy to be valued supremely more than anything else. And I know I don't do that great at times. I know I put my family ahead of you. I know I put my job ahead of you. I know I put my hobbies ahead of you. I put everything ahead of you, God. But I don't want to do that anymore. I want to worship you as I need to, as you are deserving of. And so wherever the people in this room are at today, God, wherever you are at, just think about your life. Think about where Jesus is currently in your life. Think about the boxes that you might be trying to check off. Think about your self-centered approach to worship. Think about your agenda that you have when you come before Jesus, and lay all of that aside and just come and worship Jesus as King. Jesus, you are King. You are Lord, and you are worthy of it all. And we love you and we praise you. And it's in your name we pray. Amen.